Welcome to the Calibre Academy Optimized podcast, where we focus on how to get your mind and body primed for peak performance. In this episode, we speak to lucid dreaming teacher and sleep expert, Charlie Morley. Charlie has been lucid dreaming for over 20 years and was authorized to teach within the Kagyu School of Tibetan Buddhism in 2008. Since then, he has written 4 books which have been translated into 15 languages and has run workshops and retreats in more than 30 countries. He's spoken at both Oxford and Cambridge universities, run courses and given talks for the Metropolitan Police, Reuters News Agency, and the Army Air Corps, as well as presenting his work with military veterans on Sky News and at the Ministry of Defence Mindfulness Symposium. In 2018, he was awarded a Winston Churchill Fellowship to research PTSD treatment in military veterans and continues to teach workshops for people with trauma-affected sleep. These teachings form the core of his latest book, Wake Up to Sleep. In 2019, in a world first, he trained a group of therapists to use lucid dreaming with their clients. The first scientific study into Charlie's methods, conducted by the Institute of Noetic Science in 2022, concluded that a remarkable decrease in PTSD symptoms was experienced in almost half of the participants. We are very excited and honored to have Charlie as the guest on our third Calibre Optimize podcast series.
Charlie, welcome to the podcast.
Hello, mate. Thank you for having me.
Can you explain to us what actually is lucid dreaming?
Yeah. So a lucid dream is a dream where you know that you're dreaming as the dream is happening. So you're sound asleep. So if you've ever had a dream where you're in the dream and something weird happened and you recognize, what's my dead grandma doing here? Oh, I must be dreaming. That's a lucid dream. For those who haven't had that experience, although most have, you might want to think about a nightmare where in the nightmare you've been like, I've got to wake up. I've got to wake up. If you've ever had that experience, that was actually a lucid dream. You know, the moment you acknowledged there was a place to wake up to, you acknowledged you were asleep. And like first takeaway, I'd say, if you're ever lucky enough to get lucid in a nightmare again, don't wake up. Because every time you wake yourself from the nightmare, it's like a therapy session cut short. So the nightmare necessarily has to recur. This is why people go like, why don't my happy dreams recur? Why do only my nightmares recur? Well, because your happy dreams are integrated in the moment. You know, they don't need to recur. The letter doesn't need to be sent again. The email doesn't need to be sent again. But those dreams we wake ourselves from because they're traumatic or they're scary, or we push them away, our nightmares, those have to recur. Not because our mind hates us, but because it loves us. That internal therapist wants to help us sort stuff out. So anyway, long answer, but a lucid dream is any dream where you know that you're dreaming as the dream is happening.
So a recurring dream in that case, does that mean that that's something which is cut short? That hasn't been dealt with?
Yeah. I mean, in any case where you're getting a recurring dream, the email is, the email is being sent again, so to speak, because you haven't got the message. And in a nightmare, it's that you haven't got the message of integration of the trauma. But just in that recurring dream that you might have of something else, there's some message in there. You know, these dreams aren't random. Some are. Some, in the same way some of our thoughts are simply random. We shouldn't take them so seriously. But in some cases, some of our thoughts are deeply insightful. So too with our dreams. Some, kind of random, don't take them too seriously, but others can have deep insight. And often recurring dreams, whether they're pleasant or unpleasant, have some underlying message there that's not quite getting through. And the way you can find this out is retrospectively. Once you've got the message, the recurring dream will stop.
So once you've got the message, the recurring dream will stop. But what's the process in trying to get that message?
Yeah, well, let's look at lucid dreaming itself, because this is one of the easiest ways to get the message. If we think of all dreams as I've used this metaphor of the kind of an email or letter being sent from the unconscious mind to the conscious mind, trying to communicate some sort of insight or integration, or simply just communicate a memory that was beneficial to us during the day. We know that dreams are about memory reconsolidation and trauma integration. Those are the 2 core things. The cool thing about a lucid dream, and you can train yourself to do it. So I spoke about what a lucid dream is. Lucid dreaming is the practice of intentionally training the mind to be able to have lucid dreams. And that's kind of my job, basically, teaching people how to do that. Once you do that, it's like you don't wait for the letter. You don't wait for the email. It's like you walk into the office while your unconscious mind is typing out that email, and the unconscious is like, dude, you're here. We can have a face-to-face conversation. No need for emails. We can now talk. Just very direct communication with your unconscious mind. A little bit like hypnotherapy. If we had a minute left, I'd say anything you can treat through hypnotherapy, you can treat through lucid dreaming. It's a similar process of conscious access to unconscious material.
Fascinating. So basically, a lucid dream is when there is awareness that you're dreaming, but lucid dreaming is this process of being able to train yourself to do the lucid dream.
Very good. Yes. So there are some people who are listening who might go, oh, I have loads of lucid dreams. And there are, as I say, maybe like 1 in 100 people just have this natural capacity. I mean, all children have it. Children naturally lucid dream. So it seems to be a capacity we lose. Some make it into adulthood being able to do it. But those 1 in 100s, and they'll be listening now, some of them, I'll say, what do you do once you know you're dreaming? And they often go, oh, nothing. I just know I'm dreaming. Okay, so that's having a lucid dream. Lucid dreaming as a practice is not only knowing that you're dreaming, so becoming lucid, but intentionally using that state for psychological or spiritual growth.
So let's dive into that for a second. How can you, say someone that doesn't know how to do this process, what advice would you give to them to begin to develop that skill of lucid dreaming?
Yeah, so it is like a learnable skill. You can teach people to do it. So the first kind of 4 things that I often use in podcasts and stuff like that, 'cause it's a nice basis, these things I call the 4 Ds. So the first D is dream planning. Like decide what you want to do in your first or next lucid dream. Like you can have them spontaneously, but far better if you want to have a lucid dream, decide like, what do I want to use it for? And that question, you can frame it as, let's say I booked you a 2-hour session with the world's most powerful hypnotherapist, really amazing hypnotherapist. What would you want to work on? If you had access to your unconscious mind, what would you want to work on? And it could be performance optimization. It could be athletic performance. I mean, there are loads of studies. I was part of one actually. And they showed that you could increase athletic performance by training in the lucid dream.
Wow.
So they basically saw how well we could do this kick sequence in the waking state. Then you had to go into the lucid dream, do the same kick sequence there, and then see how well you could do it. 81.3% of the participants got better at martial arts by training in the lucid dream.
Wow.
Now, embarrassingly, I did not get any better. I don't know what happened. I mean, I did it. I got lucid. I tried the kick sequence, but when I did the kind of writing task afterwards about improved performance,
When you did this, was this with pre-trained martial artists? Was this with people with no prior experience? Because you're a trained you're a trained kickboxer as well.
I
right?
don't actually know. There were 25 people in the study. It was a Swansea University study, and they needed people who I think the main criteria was, could you have lucid dreams? Because that was kind of, I don't know whether your sets are more difficult training than martial arts. I think for their catchment for the study, they were most worried about, could you lucid dream? And then secondary was, do you have martial arts experience? So who knows? But I mean, I've got quite good experience in both. So you'd think that I'd do well in the study, but I actually didn't get any better. But anyway, so the dream plan, deciding what you want to do in the dream.
So that study, that's fascinating. Like, obviously there's a lot of research out there on visualization and performance optimization. So say a baseball player that visualizes themselves doing that motion, that then primes those little muscle fibers to get ready for that sport, for example. So that would be visualization. I wonder what's the correlation and the differences between visualizing and meditating almost on yourself performing an activity, for example, kickboxing, versus lucid dreaming.
Yeah. So imaginary rehearsal, which is exactly what you're describing there, was like the control for this. And imaginary rehearsal is great. You can have great increases. But when you looked at what it was like in the lucid dream, it far exceeded it.
Amazing.
Simply because you can't get more visualized than a lucid dream. You're literally inside a huge 3-dimensional projection of your own mind. But crucially, it seems to be that when we visualize in the waking state, there's a sense of seeing ourselves. We're kind of, okay, I'm visualizing myself doing the kick kind of in my mind's eye.
Disassociated.
As
opposed to associated,
it's not
in the
embodied.
body.
Yeah. Whereas in the lucid dream, you're literally in there. You're kind of first person player. So they think that it's because of the kind of fuller imagery there. And also crucially, once you're in the lucid dream state, neuroplasticity is engaged. So in a non-lucid dream, neuroplasticity isn't engaged. Non-lucid dreaming still helps us with memory integration and getting better at stuff. But it doesn't fine-tune new pathways. Whereas once you get lucid and the prefrontal cortex switches on, as far as the brain's concerned, you're awake. So if you train in the lucid dream, or if you face a fear in the lucid dream, if you integrate a trauma in the lucid dream, the brain doesn't think you imagined doing that. They don't think you had a hypnotherapy session for that. They think you actually did it. The brain thinks you actually were doing it. And thus it lays down these new neural pathways as if you were doing it. So it seems to be, it's a deeper kind of aspect of visualization, but also the brain thinks you're there.
it's like everything that visualization has, but on steroids times 10.
That would be such a better answer than the 2-minute ramble I just gave you. Yes, that.
In a way, it's like the subconscious doesn't know the difference between what we imagine and what's real life. And when we're in that associated embodied state, seeing things through our own eyes, the more visual, the brighter, the more realistic the image, the better the neural pathway.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So for someone that wants to start from the beginning, let's say I've never lucid dreamed before, what kind of preparation do I have to do before I get into bed, when I'm in bed, and just before sleep? What's the mechanism?
Sorry, we were doing that 4Ds thing, weren't we? And then we just got sidetracked.
All
So
right.
first one, I'll do these quicker, right?
Okay.
Firstly, decide what you want to do. Do you want to
Okay.
work with the trauma? Do you want to get better at sports? Do you just want to fly about and have sex with movie stars? That's what I spent the first 2 years doing, right? I was 16 before I got into Buddhism. I was just like sex and skateboarding. I got pretty good at skateboarding, actually. So
And you're the
maybe
lucid-
that was the neural pathway.
You could do the lucid dreaming then, back then.
Yeah, I got into it quite young.
Cool.
Yeah, my 12th birthday, I asked for this thing called a Nova Dreamer. It's like this sleep mask computer thing that you strap to your face, and it recognizes rapid eye movement and flashes red light through your eyes. I've got a few of them now, actually.
wow.
Never got it for my 12th
I want one
birthday.
of those.
So decide what you want to do in your lucid dream.
Mm.
Second of the 4Ds is train yourself to remember your dreams. So unless you regularly remember your dream, it's going to be hard to get lucid, because lucid dreaming is based on knowing the dream so well that you know the dream when you're in it. So the first thing to know is everybody dreams. People listening think, oh, I don't dream. You do dream. Unless you've had a heavy head injury or a stroke, you're going to be dreaming. There's no way to stop the human brain from dreaming. So if you're dreaming every night, then let's try and remember. So fall asleep, going through the hypnagogic state, that kind of hypnotic, drowsy state as you're falling off to sleep, saying in your mind over and over again, tonight I remember my dreams. I have excellent dream recall. So decide what you want to do, then how to do it. First, train yourself to remember your dreams. The next D, dream diaries. So write down or document your dreams in some way. Why? Because the act of writing it down helps to solidify memory. The act of writing it down helps to bring the unconscious process of the dream into the conscious waking state. And crucially, the act of writing it down helps you spot patterns. Like, let's say you spend a week writing down your dreams. At the end of the week, you look back and you're like, oh yeah, I always dream of my family home when I was a kid. God, twice I dreamt
We
of
were
my dead
talking about
grandma.
that earlier, yeah.
Yeah. So you
We
see
have
these
that,
little
yeah.
things.
Mm.
So then the next stage and the final D is dream signs, recognizing anything in your dream that can indicate to you that you're dreaming. So let's say you found one, back of my family home. Then the next night you go to sleep and you can be programming yourself. Okay, between now and breakfast, if I'm in my family home, I'm definitely dreaming. There's no other way around it. So you create these things called lucidity triggers.
Okay.
And it's much less mystical much less kind of difficult than it may sound. Let's say you owe me 50 quid, right? And you think, oh God, next time I see a cash point, I've got to get Charlie 50 quid out, right? Then you forget about cash points. But 2 days later, you walk past one, boom, something's triggered. That 50 quid. That's the prospective memory, very hardwired into the brain. So we set these prospective memory lucidity triggers.
Before you go to sleep.
Yeah, before you go to sleep.
As you're lying in bed.
Yeah. In that hypnagogic state where the brain's in deep alpha and theta, same brain waves as hypnosis. So you basically get this free state of hypnosis as you're falling asleep. So use that. So a lot of the techniques are like self-hypnosis techniques, meditations during the day, waking up at certain times of the night to maximize REM potential when you're going to these long REM periods, reality checking in the day. But yeah, those 4 Ds, I'd say decide what you want to do, train yourself to remember your dreams, write down your dreams, and then spot your patterns.
And would people write down the dreams? Is it better to do it as soon as you wake up, or
If you can.
Yeah.
You had that where you've had that amazing dream where, like, I don't know, Dalai Lama's told you the meaning of life. And you're like, I'll write it down in the morning.
I texted you one night when after Glastonbury when I had pretty heavy come down and I had some crazy dream and you were the first person. I just sent it and I've actually reread my notes the other day and I was like, what the hell was going on?
So I get a lot of after
you must get-
Glastonbury and also Secret Garden Party since they started. About a week after, I get this rash of messages, often from people I haven't spoken to in a while or kind of friends of friends going, my mates, I don't need to talk to you. I'm getting the terrors. And it's either having nightmares or sleep paralysis or weird lucid dreaming. And I always go, did you get on it about a week ago? And I'm like, yeah, so it's your serotonin just kind of regulating after that.
Yeah.
It's your sleep cycle rebalancing.
our lifestyles and what we're doing with our neurotransmitters and things during the day and the foods that we're consuming, they have an effect on our sleep, right?
Yes. Sleep impacts everything and everything impacts sleep.
So what could someone do with their nutrition and their supplements and things to increase the chances of them lucid dreaming?
Yeah. So for dreaming, specifically B vitamins, especially B6 and B12. So you know those like Barocca pills?
Yeah.
You know those effervescent thing, good for a
Mm.
hangover. If you were to pop one of those, drink like a Barocca just before bed, or if you really wanted to neurohack it, you'd do it after 4.5 hours of sleep, which is when you get most of your deep sleep and you're about to flip and transition into long REM sleep.
Yeah.
I often wake up for a pee at that time anyway. So if you were to have like a B vitamin supplement at that time or Barocca or something, I've got a lot of research that shows that'll increase the vividness of dreaming. And because it's the way it kind of increases blood flow to parts of the brain that deal with REM. And the more vivid the dream, the more likely you are to notice it's a dream. If you're having really boring dreams, there's not a lot of signals I could be dreaming. You're dreaming a zombie apocalypse and dead grandmas and, you know, Donald Trump riding a blue dragon. You're like, oh, fucking hell. Okay. This is easier to get lucid, right?
Is it something to do with like oxygen intake into the brain or something like that?
You can. There are a lot of breathing techniques you can do for lucid dreaming. So coherent breathing. So breathing at precisely 5 breaths a minute, kind of 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. Do that for 20 minutes before bed. That can help with lucid dreaming.
I just remember, have you heard of the nootropics, the paracetam, aniracetam, these
No.
kind of things? And they basically help, they increase blood flow to the brain, basically.
Okay, that sounds about right.
They're supposed to help learning and
memory stuff.
Yeah, and vocal recall and stuff like
Oh.
that. Having that before going to bed, I've had some really wild dreams.
That makes sense. Basically,
Yeah.
anything that helps with memory. So there's people who get really into the kind of neurohacking side of lucid dreaming, start taking Alzheimer's drugs.
Well, it is.
Things like galantamine.
It
stuff
basically
like
is one of those.
that.
Yeah.
Because again, a lot of lucid dreaming it's actually a memory game. It's like you might have the intention after listening to this thinking like, oh, I really want to have a lucid dream. But do you remember that you want to have a lucid dream? Do you remember to look out for your dream signs while you're dreaming? Because most of us, when we dream, we're in this kind of blacked out state. Our consciousness seems to be elsewhere. It's not. It's there waiting in the wings, but we need to remember to activate it. So anything that helps boost memory, whether it's kind of full on Alzheimer's drugs, which I kind of don't advise because it becomes a slippery slope, popping
sure.
a pill for spiritual practice. But if they're kind of vitamin supplements, and of course, even better, don't get it from supplements, get it from whole foods.
Yeah.
So like if you were to eat like, you eat a lot of them, but like a lot of almonds before bed. So far better, like almond butter smoothie, maybe, as your kind of post-workout or something in the evening. That's going to have a lot of B6 and B12 in it. Kale juice, again, not very delicious, but you bosh a bit of kale juice before bed. That's going to have high B and B6, a lot of magnesium in there too. Cacao as well, although cacao might have a little upper, so you might find it hard to fall asleep. Yeah. So that's a kind of a balancing act. But actually, caffeine is not so bad. For lucid dreaming. It's bad for sleep, but for lucid dreaming, because you want to try and some of the techniques, you actually drop into dream with no loss of consciousness. Then having a little bit of caffeine in the system can help. When I was doing the breakdance stuff, touring with Throwdown, my kind of tipple of choice was vodka Red Bull. And often we came back from shows, that was actually quite good for lucid dreaming. I had a little bit of alcohol in the system for a bit of Dutch courage. Okay, let's do it. Lucid dreaming, it's going to be great. Little bit of caffeine so I could drop in slowly through the hypnagogic state. I mean, I think it's probably the first podcast I've ever recommended vodka Red Bull for lucid dreaming. So maybe this isn't a full recommendation. I'm just saying a lot of the stuff that is bad for sleep can actually be quite good for lucid dreaming. So sleep paralysis, nightmares, multiple wake-ups can actually be harnessed for lucid dreaming.
So mugworts and valerian root as well. I remember doing some research. I got some tea. I was like, I've got to get back into this lucid state. I was trying everything, and
and did it work?
It didn't. No, I found it. I think the more kind of like consciously trying to make it
That's the
work. It was almost like I was over analyzing it.
Anxiety.
Yeah, pretty much.
It's such a delicate balance.
Yeah,
with things like mugwort, mugwort doesn't actually have any kind of direct psychoactive properties, and yet it has been used by multiple dream traditions to induce dreaming. And I think actually when people use mugwort, it's not just the placebo effect and not just the mild psychoactive compounds in it, but actually it's the fact that for thousands of years, millennia in fact, people have used mugwort in multiple dream traditions. So I think that works possibly through some kind of, again, this is slightly more far out, but some sort of collective awareness that has used mugwort for that. Because I found success in mugwort and I was like, fucking mugwort, there's nothing in it, man. This is bullshit. And I was like, whoa, okay, it's not. There's, in the same way with ayahuasca, the difference between ayahuasca and DMT, and people talk about the spirit of ayahuasca, the kind of consciousness that seems to be slightly different from when you isolate DMT and take it like that. I think the same with mugwort. There's some sort of perhaps even consciousness within it, because psychoactively it shouldn't affect dreaming. And yet a lot of people take it and it does. Valerian does though affect sleep.
Mhm.
any good.
I've heard like mixed opinions of whether DMT is released during dreams, a dream cycle. Have you heard anything about that?
Okay, so it's really difficult to see how DMT is released while someone's alive.
Mm.
So the working theory, although I don't actually think this is like fully validated, but the working theory is we know DMT is released when you die, right?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's used to kind of explain the visions. Oh, you're not having a near-death experience, just DMT being released. It's like that causal effect doesn't negate the near-death experience. It's like, that's crazy. And the theory is that it's released in small amounts when we sleep, and that's what leads to the hallucinatory aspects of dreaming. It's funny, someone asked me this recently, and I searched for the research. Now, a lot of people talking about it theoretically, but I've never found any research study that shows
Yeah.
that it releases during the brain. But the theory is,
Theory's there,
because
yeah.
like, how do we start? I mean, look at dreams, man. You're hallucinating something that is so realistic. However crazy the kind of laws of physics might be in it, to our brain, it's so realistic. We think we're awake.
Mm.
It's only when the alarm clock goes off in the morning, you actually realize, oh shit, I was dreaming. Or unless you practice lucid dreaming, right? So, to create those incredibly vivid hallucinations of dreaming, it makes very good sense that we're kind of tripping, that the brain is kind of, releasing this chemical that can lead to these hallucinatory experiences.
And some of them are wild. So it makes sense. And so like in terms of lucid dreaming and sleeping and all this kind of stuff for optimal performance, there's clear benefits to lucid dreaming for that, like we've discussed. But how does that affect the sleep cycle? Because obviously, getting our deep sleep's important at the beginning of the cycle, and then our REM sleep. So how does lucid dreaming affect that in a positive or negative way?
Yeah. So some of the lucid dreaming techniques should be avoided if you've currently got insufficient sleep, because they're going to be breaking up your sleep cycle. If you've got like good sleep, sufficient sleep, then on the retreats that I run, the first half of the night you sleep in your bedroom. So let's say like 10:30 till 4:30, till 3:30, you're in your bedroom. And then at 3:30, there's the option, if you want, to wake up, move from your bedroom into the sacred sleeping area, or you have bed number 2. You've got like camping setup, basically, blow up mattress and all that kind of stuff. And then I will guide people back into the sleep state, and then wake them 90 minutes later. Lights will go on. People will write down their experiences, and I'll drop them in like 4 times a night. Now,
Right. So there's quite a lot of disruption.
yeah, I mean,
during the night,
it's optional. Only
Mm.
about 50%, like say 50 people on the retreat, maybe 20, 25 of them will choose that option. And we're only doing that for 3 or 4 nights. And the reason we're doing it is to maximize the chances of getting lucid. You fall asleep once, you got 1 chance. Some crazy guy wakes you up 4 times, quadrupled your chance of success. Once they leave the retreat, I make it very clear, do not make this part of your sleep cycle. Maybe once a week, once every 2 weeks, have what I call a lucid dreaming date night, where you do the multiple wake ups, you do affect the sleep cycle. So that can be helpful. As far as the kind of sleep hygiene side of things, there are ways you can still have a lucid dreaming practice without any of the wake ups. So if someone has got insufficient sleep or they don't want to break it, don't feel you can't lucid dream. Multiple wake ups technique is just one of dozens of techniques. So I know a lot of people who do their lucid dreaming in naps because their nighttime, their nocturnal sleep cycle is so fractured. They're like, I don't want to mess with them. I don't want to keep a dream diary then. I just need to be able to sleep and do my thing. But I can nap. And in the nap state, any period of sleep outside of your main monophasic sleep cycle, you enter REM way quicker than at night. It doesn't take 4.5 hours to get to those long REM periods. You can drop into a long REM period after like 20, 30 minutes. So it actually makes it more accessible for lucid dreaming.
So, because I know I'm pretty protective over my nighttime sleep. Got the Aura ring, and it's the first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, check my sleep score. And so this is appealing the napping technique. And is it the same? You just follow the same procedure of the 4 Ds?
No, the napping technique, you would probably do like a falling asleep consciously technique, which is where you can actually transition. You kind of meditate through the hypnagogic state. At a certain point, it will like black out, and either it'll black out into stage 2 sleep, where you can do something called conscious sleeping, or it will kind of move into dream. So if you stay in the hypnagogic state for long enough,
Which is what specifically is the hypnagogic state?
Hypnagogic state is stage 1 of sleep, and it's experienced by most people as extreme drowsiness. So your eyes are closed, You can still hear the sounds in the room. You still feel your body in the bed, but you're starting to get the hallucinations.
You're in theta brainwaves at this point.
Yeah, deep alpha and theta. Yeah. So close your eyes, and within a few moments, most people, if they're in relaxed consciousness, will start to display alpha. It's like the blinds go down, relax. We start to move into these kind of low alpha. Once you get really deeply relaxed, as you are in the hypnagogic, that alpha then peaks and you move into theta. But yeah, so you're very drowsy. Your eyes are closed. You'll start having, many people will start having the hypnagogic hallucinations. You might get those things.
Jolt, I get them all the time, man.
Okay, yeah. So myoclonic jerks, they're called.
I get big ones of those.
I get them on the
like,
plane. That's the plane. That's the
and there's
classic
someone
one,
next to
isn't
you.
it? When you,
Sorry, mate. Yeah.
Like Begbie out of Train Spot. And
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So in that hypnagogic state, at certain times of the night and at certain times of the day, if you fall asleep, rather than hypnagogic, because usually the sleep cycle goes hypnagogic, light sleep, deep sleep, and then dream. Dreaming comes at the end of a cycle.
Yes.
But in napping or in the second half of the night, you start going hypnagogic dream. So you can actually surf through the hypnagogic, and the hallucinations will become more and more intense. Then they'll start like solidifying, and then more solidifying, and more, and then boom, you're in a dream. And it's so cool when that happens, because you see how the brain has created reality. You're like, well, look, 15 minutes ago, I was sitting up in bed writing down my dreams. I've now closed my eyes. Let's say it's 5 in the morning, or 6 in the morning, close to waking up time, or closer. Close your eyes. You start hallucinating. Eventually, those hallucinations become so real, a full reality is created in front of you, and then bam, you're in it. I mean, God. And then you read these things from Buddha, like, with our mind, we make the world. And you're like, yeah, I just saw my mind make a world.
Yeah.
And in that lucid dreaming world, pinch yourself to see if you're dreaming. Bullshit. Pinch yourself in the lucid dream. You feel pain. Now there's a head fuck for you.
Right.
You're like, hang on. This arm doesn't exist. It's made of mind. These fingers that are pinching it don't exist. But I pinch it. And
you can actually feel pain in your dreams.
But, and this is a cool one, you feel pain, but you don't suffer. Suffering is the aversion to pain in the lucid, or from the Buddhist point of view.
The belief that you cannot fix the pain, isn't it? Suffering. Or whatever.
Anything that's kind of, the Buddhist view is that kind of pain is avoidable. Suffering is the aversion to pain. And that we have some kind of, we have some semblance of control over. You can be in a lucid dream and kind of cut your arm and you, oh, fuck, it's so realistic. Oh, and I'm bleeding. It's so realistic. But I know I haven't been cut. So there's no kind of aversion to it. I guess the way I describe it is like, I don't know if you have any tattoos, but when you get tattooed, it fucking hurts. But that you're not suffering. It's like, oh, I'm getting a cool piece of artwork done. So the pain is there. You can't say it doesn't hurt, but you wouldn't say I'm hating it. So you see that kind of difference, and it's that kind of pain in the lucid dream.
So when you're in a lucid dream, I mean, because you've had all this experience, what kind of shit can you create? I mean, like, can you literally just become a god of your own world? Like, what's some of the things that you do?
It's so crazy. So it's difficult to explain just how realistic it is. I mean, I've had lucid dreams as in fact, I'll do a reality check just to make sure. Yeah,
as might be dreaming now, man.
As realistic as this. In fact, in some ways, it's kind of hyper real. Like right now, so I've got perforated eardrum, right? So right now, my experience of sound is limited. Maybe our eyes aren't as good as they used to be. Maybe we need to wear glasses. So we admit that our visual, what we're taking in visually is not perfect, right? When you're in the lucid dream, like colors are so bright. People say, oh, how come I could see every like bit of dust on the table? How come that sound I heard in lucid dream was amazing? I mean, this is why lucid dreaming sex is so amazing, because you're not seeing through your eyes. You're seeing through your mind. You're not hearing through your ears. You're hearing through your mind. So all of the limitations of the 5 sense organs filtered through the 6 that we have in the waking state are removed. And without those limitations, it's an experience of hyper reality.
The brain, by default, distorts, deletes, and generalizes to make sense when we're conscious, when we're awake, of reality.
Absolutely. Now imagine if you can enter a state where it does not generalize, does not delete.
Yes. So this is what you're saying, basically. It's when you're in this lucid dream, I like to call it, well, there's that delete, distort, generalize. Then there's HD. So HD is when we're becoming a bit more aware of what's in our surrounding. And then ideally getting into that raw. So like we're taking in information and it's
raw data.
And it's like raw data.
Yes.
And
that's like a lucid dream.
Yeah.
So say that again. You said you got normal consciousness, then HD.
HD. So HD would be when you're more present with where you are. And it's like you're really kind of observing your surroundings and tuning into the different channels of sound, for example, being mindful. Yeah. And then raw is where there's like no labels.
Oh, that's such a good
and
description of lucid dream. Yeah. Lucid dream is like the raw data. it's like raw, like all the colors are so bright. I mean, often in lucid dream, I might have this great dream plan to work with my inner child and deal with my childhood trauma. And I'll get lucid and I just want to take this in for a bit. Like, and okay, one of the coolest things I did in lucid dream was a table. It wasn't like this, actually, a different table, but I became lucid and I saw this table and I was touching it. I could feel the grain of the wood. And I was like, detail of this. And I knew, I was like, okay, so I'm asleep in bed. I'm inside my mind. This is all a huge 3-dimensional projection of my own psychology. And look at the grain of the wood. And then I kind of just tapped on the table. I was like, fuck, it makes the right noise and everything. The echo's in the right place. And I looked under the table. Yeah. And I taps that way. And then I woke up. And I was like, oh, that's a kind of a, cool lucid dream. Never done that before. And then when I woke up, I went into my kitchen and I went to the table and I went, and I just had this moment of like, boom. Like it went to raw.
Yeah.
But I was awake.
Yeah.
And it was just, boom. Whoa. And I realized there was not just similar. It wasn't similar to the table in the waking state. It was the same. And then I was like, reality's up for grabs.
Wow.
So as an expert,
Wow.
Actually, just telling the story, like, it's a bit hot.
Yeah.
As an expert in the field, are we right in thinking that you every night you lucid dream,
not at
or
all.
like can you just switch it on now?
No,
like obviously you know all the practices
Yeah.
and how to get there. Like how often are you lucid dreaming? And
So there are some brilliant lucid dreamers out there, far better than me in their practice. What I think I'm very good at is teaching people to lucid dream. So as far as like if I don't know, if anyone wants to learn to lucid dream, I really feel that I have a skill set to teach. So, and I've taught like some of the toughest crowds, highly traumatized populations. So as far as the lucid dream teaching goes, I feel very, very, very confident. As far as my own lucid dreaming practice, as we were talking before, and I said for next year, I've taken like no bookings or very, very few bookings, is because I realized about 5 years ago, probably when maybe like when I signed with Mind Valley and it started getting really, really popular, I kind of knew there was going to be a trade-off. I was like, whoa, this is going to get really big. And I know my practice is going to suffer. And it kind of has for the last 5 years.
Your practice meaning your own?
My own practice. Yeah. Like,
right.
7 years ago, I was doing like 3-month silent retreats, like solo. I was a practitioner, not a great practitioner, but I was a practitioner. And that I have lost that over the last 5 years. So yes, of course I still lucid dream, but whereas it was like on, regular, like weekly basis, now maybe it's every couple of weeks. Sometimes I might go like a whole month without lucid dream, and then I'll teach. And when I teach the retreats, like I said, those 50 people, and when 25 are in the room with you and they're expecting you to get lucid, okay, I switch it back on and it's kind of there. So yeah, it can still be switched back on. But when I look at my regularity of lucid dreams in my 20s and 30s, wow, I was having like hundreds and hundreds of lucid dreams.
You did it.
Now there are fewer lucid dreams, but I'd say, I think maybe with just getting older, like one of my lucid dreams now feels like it's worth 10 years ago, because they are rarer for me. They're more like, a few a month rather than a few a week now. So when I am lucid, I'm not messing about anymore. I'm like, right, childhood trauma, come to me, integrating my relationship with my dad, working with deep stuff, because I know they're rarer. So I can't say I regret that I'm having less now, but also I regret it enough, or I'm aware of it enough that next year I'm, taking this time off to really get back into my practice.
And you said you did a 3-month silent retreat.
Yeah. I talked on a few days.
Heavy.
I talked on Christmas Day. I talked on New Year's Day. I talked on the day I got stung by a scorpion. Oof. But most of the days.
3 months. That is, I mean, I haven't even done a 3-day yet, but I think for me, that's going to be
there was a
challenge.
lot of build
I'm
up.
try.
There was like, I'd been living in the Buddhist center for 7 years, and I'd done, you do a day retreat, then you do a weekend, then you do a week, then you do one of those 10-day Vipassanas. In that order, by the way. God, the people who jump into 10-day Vipassanas who've got no experience. I'm like, mate, that's like running a marathon when you haven't jogged around the block. So then to a 10-day, then maybe to 2 weeks, then a 1 month. And then actually the 3-month thing becomes more accessible, just like any kind of training regime, right?
And what are you doing there? Are you literally just like meditating all day, or?
Yeah, so about kind of 10 hours a day. I got up to like 11 hours, but 10 hours was like, that was where I could still get enough sleep at night and stuff like that. And I was doing Tibetan Buddhist practice. So the Vajrayana practices actually have very little silent sitting meditation. So although I wasn't speaking to anyone for 3 months, God, I was making noise the whole day, chanting, saying my mantras, making smoke offerings. It's quite shamanic, actually, Tibetan Buddhism. compared to the other forms of Buddhism. I mean, because there's no centralized authority in Buddhism, the different strands are so different. I mean, Tibetan Buddhism externally in its exoteric presentation is so different to Zen Buddhism, the Zen and Tibetan. Whereas esoterically, they're absolutely the same. They're about recognizing the nature of mind, recognizing your own Buddha nature. But yeah, so I wasn't kind of sitting in silence for 3 months. I was doing a lot of these practices, constantly chanting mantras, doing visualization practices, doing the lucid dreaming practice at night.
So that's part of the lucid dreaming practice, was part of the retreat,
Yeah.
the silent retreat that you're
Yeah.
doing.
So, I mean, because it was solo retreat, I set my own schedule, but the
Okay.
schedule was kind of created with my teacher. And for 1 month of the retreat, my teacher was actually on the premises. He was running his own retreat. So I could check in with him if I needed to. And I did like once every couple of weeks just to ask questions about practice and stuff like that. But yeah, in Tibetan Buddhism, like lucid dreaming is one of the core practices. And I didn't actually know that. When I got into lucid dreaming as a teenager, again, I was just using it as just like fucking cool. I thought, oh my God, I'm 16. And I got kind of quite good at it because I'd been into it since I was 12, right? But then when I started reading the books at 16, I got into it pretty quick. And then when I was 18 and started getting to Buddhism, and I mentioned this term dream yoga, I thought, what the fuck's dream yoga? Oh, it's a spiritual practice of lucid dreaming. And I'd had 2 years of lucid dreaming then, but just like sex and skateboarding. And I remember saying to the monk, like, what do you guys use lucid dreaming for? You know, because I was like, I know what I use it for. And he went, oh, we use it to train for the moment of death. We use it to explore the nature of reality, like the table tapping thing. We use it to do our spiritual practice while we sleep. And then he said, what do you use it for? And I was like, oh, just flying about mainly. You know, I didn't want to say what I was using it for. But it was a penny drop moment. I was like, oh shit. So this new thing I'm getting into, Buddhism, I seem to have this skill set from my, former life of just like being a teenager that is directly applicable to this. And in Buddhism, it's seen as quite a kind of not one of the beginner practices.
Sure, yeah.
So I was like, that's so cool.
So how does the traditional Tibetan dreaming practices for lucid dreaming, like how do they differ to the more Western practices?
Okay, so when I first got into it, I thought they were completely different because, again, the kind of exoteric presentation of them is so different. But actually, if you get to the core of it, the real essence, they're so similar. For example, one of the most famous lucid dreaming Western practices is called MILD, M-I-L-D, mnemonic initiated lucid dream. I found a 15th century dream yoga manual. I'm not saying the scientist nicked it from here, but a 15th century dream yoga manual, which has the exact MILD technique, like in the same order. And I'm not saying Stephen LaBerge nicked it and made it his own. I'm just saying no such thing as an original idea, right?
A lot of
we've got the same
just regurgitated
system, the same mind. Yeah, different discoveries at different times. So the only technique that I teach on retreats that you don't find in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition is the hand check thing, the reality check. That seems to be from the Toltec tradition, the Mexican tradition. And this is where anytime something weird or dreamlike happens in the day, rather than ignoring it, you kind of ask yourself, well, could I be dreaming right now? And I'm not like, psychotic. I know I'm not dreaming. But you just create a habit. You think, oh, I just thought, could I be dreaming? So I'm going to do a habit of doing an impossible thing. So I think, could I be dreaming? And then I'm going to check, like, can I pull my finger like that? Or can I breathe through my nose? Or can I check gravity? Although I don't do that because you look a bit mental. Or this one, if my hand flips over, does it change? Because in a dream, often your hand changes, right? Because it's too detailed for the brain to project quickly.
Okay.
And then eventually, just through habit, you dream about doing that. You spend your whole day packing boxes. What do you dream about at night? Spend your whole day, every time something weird happens, dreaming, checking your hand or doing the nose pinch. Eventually, you dream about it. But in the dream, you can breathe through your nose, even if you pinch it. In your dream, when you pull your finger, it goes, whoop. So you get this kind of display. And you're like, oh shit, I'm dreaming. And you get lucid. And it's so cool when that happens.
So these triggers are kind of key, right? To know the difference between when you're in a...
Yeah, again, it's only one technique. And the Tibetans still have that. They just don't use the hand check. They do it internally. So they do like an internal reality check. So when something weird happens, they stop and they check in. Like, am I embodied? Am I breathing? Can I feel the air on my skin? So it's like a somatic, kind of more meditative reality check, but they're still doing it to check what reality they're in.
Your studies with PTSD.
Oh yeah.
This sounds fascinating. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So I've been working with veterans military veterans for like 7 years now. originally a veteran, came on one of the retreats I was running at this Buddhist retreat center, had this big breakthrough, his nightmares stopped. And then he sent me this email saying, I integrated more of my PTSD on that 4-day retreat than 4 years of therapy. And I didn't know him very well, but I was like, mate, can I put that on my website? Because that's like such a good quote. So it was like the quote on my website for a long time. Anyway, a few years later, although I was kind of aware of him, but a few years later, he got back in touch saying that he was now, he'd done mindfulness teacher training and was now offering mindfulness retreats to veterans. And would I come and teach the same techniques that work with him with a group of 20 veterans on this retreat? And I was like, mate, I know you had a great breakthrough and that was really cool, but that was at the Buddhist center. That was the way that I teach. I have no idea, man. You're the only veteran I know. And he said, oh, look, we'll come and see how it is. And it was a very, I had to learn quick. Like, you're in a group with 20 veterans and you're the only civilian. You're from Civvy Street. Like, they test you quick. Like, I remember I walked in and I had arrived. They had already been there for 2 days. And I arrived during one of their breaks. And you walk in, you just feel 20 eyes, literally just start at your feet, just look you up and down and then look away. And you're like, oh, I've just been judged by the entire group in like one thing, but it's like quick judgments. Like, is this guy safe? And this is what it's really about. It might manifest as pushing people away, but often when you're working with traumatized populations, they're just checking, are you safe? And then the insults began. It was just like, I've never heard so much insults and swearing, not directly me, but the group. And then I was like, okay, so this is the way in. And then someone said something,
connecting or rapport.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So I I don't know, said some sweary insult to Keith, the guy who brought me in, and they were like, okay, he's all right. And then you're kind of in, but God, the banter. I remember just feeling out of my depth the first 5 minutes and go, okay, this is how we're going to speak to each other for the next 5 days.
What varying levels of PTSD are there? It's from mild to extreme. What?
Yeah, some of it's really extreme. So like, yeah, there's one guy who was like booked onto the retreat, and then the night before the retreat, basically like cut part of his finger off. While he said like while he was chopping some food and stuff like that. And Keith mentioned, I was like, oh God, that's like what a crazy accident to happen the night before the retreat. And he went, no, that was an accident. He can't be here. He can't cope. And that was like the first story I'd had when I arrived at the retreat. Because I said, oh, we're 20. He went, oh, they're 19. One of them can't come now because he cut his finger off. And I was like, fuck, man. Okay, I'm, again, just feeling completely out of my depth. And I was for the first couple of years. And thank goodness for Keith McKenzie, who just took me under his wing. He's an ex-para. And he just brought me along to all his stuff. And eventually, because I was with him, I was kind of accepted in.
Could resonate with them as well.
Yeah. And then also on that retreat, the techniques worked for a few of them. Not all of them. I'd say maybe 5 of them had big breakthroughs with the lucid dreaming. And then that spread, the community's very kind of isolated. So it's hard to get into the community. But if you're helping the community and there's this guy, he's some Buddhist dude, he taught this stuff to Keith, 5 of the other lads, it worked. And then kind of, oh, and it's free. He doesn't charge you. I've never charged for the veteran stuff. Then word spreads. And then we did another retreat, and then we started to bring in, because I said like 5 of them, the lucid dreaming really worked. The others, it didn't. But I saw the other stuff on the retreat they were offering really did. Breath work, qigong, movement, yoga nidra, deep relaxation, and crucially, heavy work together. So working out in the garden, like lifting shit, chopping down trees.
As part of a group.
Yeah, as like an invisible therapy, Keith used to call it.
Primal kind of stuff, probably connection.
Getting stuff, literally mud under your fingernails, literally, and then metaphorically mud under your finger. Like I had the only time the veterans would really open up about what they were going through was in the gardening bits when we were doing the heavy lifting, literally the heavy lifting, actually. They would kind of start to speak like, oh, something you mentioned about nightmares before. And then they start to talk about their nightmares because, you're not facing each other. You're not in a room with 20 other people looking at you. You're just like I was with this guy weeding. We're getting these weeds out the cracks in the pavement at the Buddhist center. So he was kind of looking ahead. He didn't have to look at me. We're side by side. And he started sharing kind of some really traumatic nightmares he'd had.
Building that right environment for people to open up. So the breath work and all the rest of it is accessing that and bringing it to the forefront. But to share it is another thing, right? Some people don't want to share things in
and we've created a way now because so in the last few years, I then did breathwork teacher training, yoga nidra teacher training,
Mm.
because I was like, oh, if I can have that skill set that's worked so well in those veterans retreats, but can offer it myself, then I've got something that I can really work with now with Keith. So then we did that kind of training together and then started offering all those modalities.
What type of breath work do you do?
So slow, deep breathing. So although there are loads of benefits from other forms of breath work and, all the Wim Hof method and the Tumo stuff could be really great, for like highly traumatized populations, I wouldn't suggest that because it's very, very
Why is that?
activating.
Activating the
Yeah.
sympathetic nervous system too much?
It's like these guys are really on edge.
So like holotropic breathing, for example, wouldn't be a good idea.
I wouldn't advise that for people with high, and if you're like in a one-on-one with a therapist doing this kind of breath work, it could be brilliant. And for your kind of certain body type and the trauma you're working with could be brilliant. Because I'm working with like a group of 20 and I don't know their kind of trauma profile, I need stuff with zero contraindications, but that work. So I use essentially resonant breathing, which is any breathing rate between 4 and 6 breaths a minute. So about 75% slower than usual. We're walking around, most of us breathing about 15 breaths a minute, right? So you slow it down to around 4, 5, or 6. And not just slow, deep breathing, but slow, deep breathing with movement, which is essentially Qigong. But the people I learned it from, Breath, Body, Mind, organizations set up by these brilliant 2 American psychiatrists who are like Harvard trained and New York Medical School. And they don't use the word Qigong because they're offering it in medical settings. They use mindful movement with the breath, mindful movement upon the breath. It's like, okay, with this full on
See what you
Qigong,
say,
but
yeah.
very kind of, basic stuff, 4 forearm circles, but slow movement with slow breathing.
What is the inhale, exhale pattern in terms of seconds in, seconds out?
Again, 6 seconds in, 6 seconds out. So you
it's
can do it on a
almost
slow
like heart coherence in a way.
But yeah, so coherent breathing with a big C and a big B is like a kind of a I don't know, it's copywritten, but like a term for specific 5 breaths a minute breathing. Then resonant breathing is anything between 4 and 6, and that's the more medical term. What we found is that to ask someone to breathe 75% slower from the start is just like putting the brakes on the car, right? You're screeching to a halt. But if you get them to slow their breath down by slowing their body down, it becomes much more accessible. So we do these kind of arm movements like this, 4 seconds in, and then 4 seconds and the arms come down, and that evens out about 4 to 6 breaths a minute. And the reason we do the movement is because disembodiment and dissociation are 2 of the hallmarks of PTSD. So by helping people move their body in a certain way, we're helping bring them into it because they have to have somatic awareness how my body's moving, which helps with the dissociation. And also the disembodiment can often manifest for people with high levels of trauma as kind of like a form of clumsiness. And it's not clumsiness. It's that the nervous system's been so disrupted that there's a slight delay between, the hand that wants to pick up the bottle and, knowing where the bottle is. It's a small thing, but can have a lot of shame, especially for veterans who are often kind of physically peak performance, and then they start to become clumsy and dropping shit. So actually stuff you can do to help with re-embodying them into their body not only helps with calming the nervous system, but is also like a really good kind of, helps a lot with confidence too. Yeah.
And that's where a lot of the trauma and emotions is held, right? In the body. And
everything we do is breath and body. It's like, if you look at the way that trauma affects the brain, you cannot talk trauma. You can't talk someone out trauma. Like talk therapy is brilliant. I've been in talk therapy for the last 3 years since, my mom started dying and my marriage broke down and stuff like that. For things like that,
conscious process,
talk therapy
isn't
is brilliant. Yeah. Prefrontal cortex engaged, great. We can talk our way through it. We can be cognitive about it. But deep trauma, the part of the brain that gets knocked out during deep trauma is the prefrontal cortex. So if you try and talk to someone about that and engage the prefrontal cortex, it will simply be theoretical. And you may not be able to remember it anyway because of the way memory is stored when we have trauma. So the breath and the body are the way in. Like the amygdala is affected by breath and body. So if you can calm the amygdala, which is the threat center in the brain, the prefrontal cortex will come back online when it is safe enough to do so. But it's like it gets knocked out during the trauma. So if you look at the way trauma therapies lay out and the effectiveness of them, talk therapy is often way down at the bottom compared to breath work, really good for trauma, and also body-based stuff. All of the body stuff that people already kind of know about, somatic release and dance and movement and Qigong and martial arts and stuff like that. But also so much that when I was researching in America, they were trialing this thing called therapy running or therapy jogging. which is based on bilateral stimulation, and you move anytime you go left, right, left, right, left, right. So boxing, drumming, clicking your fingers, tapping like that creates this movement of blood across the corpus callosum in the center of the brain, which helps with integration of memory. The research on that was so strong. They were trialing this thing where basically you meet up with your therapist in the park. You sit on a park bench, you 15 minutes of talk therapy, then you jog or run for 10, 15 minutes. You find another bench, you sit down for another 15 minutes, and that's how you take the therapeutic hour with these periods of jogging. And in the jogging, you can continue to talk or you can just rest. And they found that having these periods of movement, but specifically bilateral stimulation movement within periods of talk therapy kind of bridged that gap as to why, talk therapy wasn't working that well. But if you combine it with body movement, then it starts to work really well.
Pad work with martial arts could be great for that.
Flow state, man. And that's got all this stuff with flow state, and you're like, someone asked you the sequence and you can't remember it because you've been holding the pads for so long, but your body remembers it. It's like, that's indicative of flow state, where you stop thinking about it, but you're kind of moving into this state together.
So how was, you're a martial artist yourself, you kickboxer, right? So I think we touched on something before we started recording. How have you used lucid dreaming maybe to help with your training? I know we were talking about before about in the sequence where you're learning how to kick in your dreams.
Yeah, so actually most of the only time I can think of like 3 or 4 specific lucid dreams where I've been training martial arts, and they're all for Krav Maga, which I know that you've done the like teacher training in, right? Yeah, exactly. So I was on the same route to that teacher training.
And Stuart said to say hello as well. Yeah, he said,
cool.
put it on the Facebook. He said to say hello. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was leading up to injury preventing me doing it, but when I was leading up to the teacher training thing, because some of the stuff was so new to me, the knife defenses and stuff like that, I was like, I actually need to train this in the lucid dreams. And there I would get lucid and I would find a partner in the lucid dreams. It's so funny. I always used to ask for their consent. Like I knew it's me. I'd be like, it's just this kind of element of me that's manifested in this kind of, other player within the lucid dream. But I always ask, like, are we okay to train? And they would nod and then I'd train. Because otherwise it's like punching yourself in the face. If you're in a lucid dream and you commit violence to yourself, you commit violence to anything in the lucid dream, it's like punching yourself in the face.
Quick question there though. You're training with someone in your lucid dream.
Yeah.
Is that because I had one of the lucid dreams, I was flying over the canals in Amsterdam when I was younger, and it was my mate.
Yeah.
Flacco, and he was the first person I did acid with, and I told him the next day, I said, I had this dream. He was like, brother, I had this.
Oh, whoa.
And I put it down like he's a bit of a psychonaut, and like, and I've had other dreams, one after Glastonbury, where I was like, I could see everyone's energy cells in their bodies, and everyone got together, and everyone was just like flying in and helping each other. That was the one that I texted you.
That's
I was
cool.
just like, it was absolutely mad. So like, within this world, the lucid dreaming world, when you're training with someone, is that not necessarily someone else having another experience in another dimension or another dream?
Yeah,
like, that's always fascinating.
So I talk about this idea of the 1%. I'm like, 99% of everything in your lucid dream is you. In an out-of-body experience, wow, you can flip that. 99% isn't you. Out-of-body experience, genuine one, you are not in Kansas anymore. But a lucid dream, you're flipping in. You're inside your own psychology. So 99% of it is you. But there is a crucial 1%. The crucial 1%. Like, I don't know, it's 1% or 10%, whatever. I just call it the 1%, where every now and again you encounter something in the lucid dream, or I have, when I'm like, that's not my mind. I've had hundreds, maybe over 1,000 lucid dreams. I don't know actually, but definitely 100, over kind of 500, 600, 700 lucid dreams. So I know the space very, very well. And I'd say maybe I've had 9 or 10 experiences where something has entered the lucid dream that is not me.
What do you mean, like something like how?
Like one of them was an ancestor.
Different entity.
And it was
But
definitely
you
her.
were the ancestor,
No,
or
that's
they
what-
were just there?
Yeah, so I mean, I've done kind of stuff in the lucid dream before where like it was actually my dead grandma. That's why I often use it as the example. And she would often be a dream sign for me, so much so that I would fall asleep trying to dream of her because I knew whenever she appeared in the dream, I'd be like, oh, it's Jay. Bam, I'm dreaming. But then this one time, I was in a lucid dream. I hadn't called for her. She wasn't a dream sign. I was in the lucid dream, and she appeared. And I have no evidence for you. There's no science to back this up other than just subjective experience. But it wasn't a projection. It was as if she was superimposed over the dream set. Like imagine now, actually they can do it now, can't they? There's holograms. The Tupac hologram, right? Now it looks like Tupac, but you can tell it's a hologram, right? Because you can see the way it interacts with light. It's just not made of the same stuff we are. It was like that. It was as if a hologram came into the dream and there was no expectation. She walked up to me and had this like message for me from the ancestors. And I was like, woke up, had a very strong impact on my kind of somatic field when I woke up. And I mean, I've, seen all the science on this that shows, it's just a hallucination. It's just the brain creating these things. But in that case,
You felt it.
that was
It
the
was-
1%,
it was-
man. It's like, you'll
yeah.
know it when you feel it. And there's
Yeah,
about 8 or 9 other experiences like that where I'm like, that wasn't me.
And we
And
touched
your
on,
one sounds like it could have been the 1%.
I do blame that to the extravagance of Glastonbury. as well.
Yeah, I bet. That'll do it.
And the serotonin levels. We mentioned something briefly as well about, we were talking about Carl, and you said you had a prophetic
yeah,
dream
prophetic
with him
dream.
about that because
Yes. Okay, so again, prophetic dreams, how to prove them, how to prove, did you actually dream it before it happened, blah, 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 who knows, right? Sometimes you really nail it. Sometimes you get it. And leading up to this fight, it's actually the last fight I had. So this is, I don't know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, before COVID anyway. And leading into this fight, I had a dream, like a couple of weeks before the fight, that I'm in the ring with my opponent. It doesn't actually look like Carl who I was fighting, but just a kind of a opponent in the dream who looked different. And in this dream, I did some kind of strike that really hurt them, and they got really injured, and they were going, clutching their face like that. And then in the dream, I was so shocked that I injured them so badly, I dropped to my knees and went, oh, like that. Like as if I was praying to them, but it wasn't. I was just like, fuck, man, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. That's the dream. Boom. And I wake up. And this dream just had this feeling. I was like, oh God, why can't I shake this feeling? And again, that's kind of one of the things about prophetic dreams. It's like the mind wants you to know, take this one seriously. So I remember typing it into my phone. And then usually when you write it down, dreams, you've kind of downloaded the energy.
That's when it's a proper one, when I've got to take this one to my phone.
But this one, I wrote it down, and
notes.
it's the energy still remained. I was like, God, this is a big one. And it kind of freaked me out. And actually leading into that fight, it fucked with my mind a bit. My mind wasn't fully right in that fight. My mind wasn't God, the fight for that. I was so confident. I was dancing backstage like Fury does actually. Literally dancing to funk. I was like, I feel so fucking confident. This one I didn't. My mind had gone. And it was because in many ways I kept thinking about the dream before the fight. Anyway, I mean, you can see that the fight on YouTube, you see this happen. There's a bit where fighting the wonderful Carl Orza, brilliant
lovely guy.
fighter, and lovely dude
love
too.
Carl, yeah.
Such a cool dude. And great beatboxer, of course, as well.
Yeah.
And I think it's the final round. There's an accidental headbutt. He comes underneath, bam, and you see me go, oh, fuck. And I'm kind of stunned like that. And you clearly see Carl drop to his knees and do this to me like that.
As he would.
And then his coach goes, get up. As if like, why are you doing that? And then he kind of gets up, but you see it on the video. And I was like, oh shit.
Wow.
That was exactly what happened to him. Now, of course, the dream was me injuring them
In reverse.
and then dropping. So this was slightly flipped, but I'd say that's a direct hit.
Yeah.
I mean, that is a very
That's
specific
incredible.
movement, an injury followed by a very specific thing that happened. So for me, I'd class that as a prophetic dream.
Yeah,
I don't think I ever told Carl that. So if you're watching, that's what happened.
Yeah.
And so dreaming about future scenarios that end up becoming real, is there a term for those?
Yes. One of the theories that I really like is from Carl Jung, who said more than premonition, it's more like preparation. And he described that the unconscious mind is taking in so much data that the conscious mind isn't aware of. Like if later today, if I was put into deep hypnosis, I would remember exactly what necklaces you're all wearing, what position we are in the room, what position the cameras are in. We know this, right? We know this even using kind of brain data, that the unconscious is like this huge hard drive of memory and it's kind of stored, right? But consciously, I'm not taking all this, right? So Jung had this idea that we're taking in so much data in the unconscious mind that when we dream, there's almost like an algorithm of possibility that the dreamer kind of throws up. Oh, that could be possible. That could be possible. That could be possible. Most of the time he gets it wrong. So we ignore them. But sometimes it gets a direct hit. And the example I'll use is like maybe tonight you fall asleep and you have a dream that in exactly 1 month, two of your friends, exactly 6 months, two of your friends get engaged. And then 6 months later, they get engaged. Oh my God. Half a year ago, I had this dream. It's a prophetic dream. It must be some psychic phenomena. Might be a psychic phenomena, or it could be that although consciously you didn't see it, unconsciously you noticed, Oh, they were
Connection.
chatting quite a lot at the
Yeah,
bar.
yeah,
Oh, I
yeah.
think I saw them there was a shared touch there. Consciously, I didn't notice it, but my unconscious saw the shared touch. My unconscious also knows, oh, they're both around the same age. They're both single. They both want to have kids. It's created these
There could have been
algorithms
that
of
little look
possibility.
that they gave each other in the corner of your eye, and like
Yes.
that kind of thing.
Yeah. So he has this idea that actually a lot of them are that. And I quite like that because it's, I think a lot of the kind of mystical stuff is actually that we go through life not accessing our full potential. We're all driving around in Ferraris, but we live most of our lives in like first gear, right? And when people do access that fifth or sixth gear, their sixth gear, I don't drive, when they really start working with their Ferrari.
And a lucid dream, yeah.
We think that it's mystical. In fact, it's not. If you told me that someone could run from here to 100 meters down there in like, whatever seconds, I'd be like, no way you can do it. That's impossible. Or that somebody could, through the power of their meditation or through the power of their breath, as Wim Hof's case, create an atmosphere in their body that would expel disease. I'd say, no way, that's impossible. It's not impossible. It's just most of us don't do the training to do it. So I think too, as well with mystical stuff in dreams, like if you do the training, you can have outcomes which seem to be mystical. In fact, they're not mystical. They're just possible.
This stuff was never taught to us in school as
Well,
well.
this is the thing.
Like just basic stuff, even just, meditation, breath work,
True.
and, things like this. So it's,
And
we have to discover it ourselves, right? And then you go down the rabbit hole, and then we're here.
we have this mind-body vehicle, and I always like that analogy of like, well, choose what vehicle you want to be in to experience life. So if you're going to be on a bicycle, it's going to be very different than if you're in the sports car,
Yeah.
Or if you're in that rusty sort of old 10-year-old Ford Fiesta kind of thing. So it's like we've got that opportunity to upgrade, but we need to tweak the systems. And there's no manual for this, or we're not taught this when we're younger. So sleep's one of the keys for that, and obviously getting good quality sleep.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you suggest, tried and tested, sort of the 80-20 of getting a good night's sleep, basically?
So this is what my latest book is about. So the latest book has like a couple of chapters on lucid dreaming, but essentially it's an insomnia book. It's for people with sleeplessness, based on all the work with the veterans. And I would say the first thing to know is that sleep is a natural phenomena that will occur in the absence of stresses that prevent it from occurring. So it's not that we need to learn stuff to help us sleep. It's that we need to learn how to remove the stresses that prevent sleep from happening naturally. So a lot of the stuff the one thing I don't teach is sleep hygiene stuff. It's like if sleep hygiene tips worked, we wouldn't have the epidemic of sleeplessness. And everyone knows not to look at your phone before bed, not to have coffee after 2 p.m., have all these kind of sleep hygiene tips, make sure your bedroom's dark and cold and all this stuff. If that worked in and of itself, we wouldn't have people with sleeplessness. If it is working, and for people who are using that and it's working, of course, continue doing it. But for people with stress or trauma affected sleep, which is like my kind of specialty,
Like proper full-blown insomnia kind of
it's
thing,
like offering
right?
a Band-Aid for a bullet wound, man. It's like, and also every time you do these sleep, oh God, I dreamt about this last night, saying this exact thing. Every time you start doing stuff that changes your external environment to help you sleep, you're subtly creating this idea that sleep isn't natural. I'm not good at it. So I need to change my external environment to make myself good at it. I say actually get to the point where you can calm your nervous system to such an extent that you can sleep anywhere. I mean, you can sleep in a nightclub if you learn how to calm the nervous system like this. Perfect. Then you're great. You know all this stuff. So the main things I do are working with calming the nervous system. So I've got these like 5 pillars, right? The first one is sleep awareness. Learn about sleep, learn about your sleep. And I tell people to become their own sleep tracker. Now, if like you spoke the Aura Ring, right? If that's working for you, keep using it. However, unfortunately, even the Aura Ring, which is like the best on the market at the moment, it's only about 70% accurate, which people think, oh, that's really great. But it doesn't mean that 30% of the time it's quite right. It means 30% of the time that data is completely off. So just be aware of that. Take it with a pinch of salt. There is something in the new DSM-5, the diagnostic manual used by psychiatrists in America. There's actually a new diagnosis called orthosomnia, which is neurotic preoccupation with sleep tracker data leading to negative mental health outcomes. It basically means people are waking up in the morning.
Obsessing about it.
Yeah, they've actually had quite a good sleep, right? And then they sit and have their coffee, they check the app. Oh my God, only 5 minutes of REM, only 50 minutes of deep sleep. Then they nocebo themselves into kind of neurosis, feeling they haven't slept better. So if it's working for you, use it. However, the future looks bright because there's this thing called the Zmax that we use in the sleep lab experiments. And that's like a mini EEG. It's like a about the size of a GoPro. Imagine kind of sleeping with GoPro on your head. That's a mini EEG. That's like brainwave. So
so you can actually
that's
monitor your
that's
brainwaves,
yeah,
like alpha, theta, gamma.
Yeah, so that's like EEG. That's really good. So it costs about $1.50, right? But once they make it a little bit smaller and a little bit cheaper, maybe 5 years, sleep trackers will be very, very accurate. So we just need to hold that.
That is wild that you can actually measure your brainwaves.
Sleep awareness, first thing. Learn about how sleep works. Learn, crucially, about how you sleep. You know, this idea of us all kind of getting to 8 hours per 24-hour period, 7 to 9 hours per 24-hour period is what we should be aiming for, right? I'm working with people who are averaging 3 or 4 hours sleep a night. So to tell them to try and get to 9, it ain't going to happen. But what we can do is look at what I call the golden hour. If you can increase your sleep, whatever it is, by 1 hour per 24-hour period, there are huge mental and physical health outcomes to that. So big. So if you're on 4, see if you can get to 5. You're on 5, see if you can get to 6. And that includes daytime napping. That includes maybe staying in bed a bit longer, going to bed early. It doesn't matter what way you
daytime napping can add to the.
Daytime napping is so good as long as it
doesn't mess.
Is it before 40 minutes or what's the optimal time?
So you got these two like golden rules, right? Try and keep it an hour or less, and make sure this is the crucial one. Make sure it finishes 6 hours before your intended bedtime.
Okay.
Because you have this thing called sleep pressure, which is like the buildup of adenosine in the brain. And coffee is what affects adenosine, right? So that's kind of a neurotransmitter. It takes about 6 hours to build up. So as long as your nap, if you're going to go to bed at midnight, as long as your nap finishes by 6 p.m., that's long enough for sleep pressure to build up. This is why falling asleep in front of the telly or in front of Netflix before bed evening is so bad. Because you might fall asleep at 9 p.m., sleep for like an hour till 10, then wake up, and then 2 hours later try and go to bed. Think, why can't I fall asleep? Yeah, because you've only had 2 hours for your sleep pressure to build up. Far better if you're falling asleep at 9 p.m., go to bed at 9 p.m. Don't fall asleep on the sofa. So anyway, first one. Oh, sorry. Just a cool fact about the 1 hour thing. The reason we know that 1 hour extra or less sleep can have such a powerful impact is that every year, 1.6 billion people around the world do this experiment where we give them 1 extra hour and 1 fewer hour sleep, right? When the clocks go forward and back. Now on the day after where you give people 1 extra hour in bed, that's all, it's 1 extra hour. There's a 21% decrease in heart attacks the next day. There's a 15% decrease in traffic deaths. And I think it's between a 10 and 15% decrease in suicides the next day.
Wow.
That globally is tens of thousands fewer people die when you give them 1 extra hour in bed. Now, of course, unfortunately, same works the other way. When the clocks change later in the year and you lose an hour, next day, 25% increase in heart attacks the next day, loads more traffic deaths, and a suicide peak the next day. So really just 1 hour can make such a big difference.
I mean, I've certainly noticed in myself, if I'm underslept, problems seem bigger than they are, it's easy to get overwhelmed, and just getting that extra sleep, everything just makes so much more sense and your resilience levels go up.
Yes. So that feeling of everything feeling worse after a night's sleep, that's actually neurobiological. So if you have less than 6 hours sleep, which is what counts as insufficient sleep, and definitely if you miss a whole night's sleep, your amygdala is 60% more active than usual. So, like if you haven't slept and the next day, everything fucking pisses you off. Someone says like, do you want some water? You're like, fucking water? Like, why is everything so annoying, right? It's kind of not your fault. Well, it is your fault. It's your brain, but it's not your fault, but it is your responsibility, of course. But just knowing that your brain's 60% more active, that your amygdala is 60% more reactive, just gives you a little bit of space. Like me and my girlfriend, if we've had a terrible night's sleep, we'll just go 60%, man. Like, as in kind of give me some space. And don't talk to me today. But if later that day where you've had a whole no night's sleep, right, you can get an hour nap. They've found that amygdala reactivity drops to baseline.
Just with 1 hour?
1 hour.
Even if you have no sleep that whole night? Yeah,
no sleep. But if you get 60 to 90-minute nap later that day, you can baseline your amygdala.
Okay. I mean, there's still lots of other negative...
Yeah, like don't try not to miss a whole night's sleep. But I mean, if you are having one of those days, then try and get a little bit shy, a little bit of nap.
Okay, so we have come to the end of our time. So, Charlie, what's next? What are you working on? Where can people find you online? Just give us a little little overview of where people can find you, what you're working on, your latest book.
Sure. So yeah, charliemorley.com, the website will have everything on there, and Instagram I'm on a lot. Actually, you'll find that there's not a lot of stuff for next year booked in, because as I said, next year I really want to return to my own practice.
We have just talked about you coming on the
Yes,
KALIBRE
exactly.
Experience
So that
retreat
sounds fun.
for.
So that I think I'll make an excuse for. Yeah. But there will be retreats next year. But this year I did 13 retreats. Next year there might be like 5 or 6. It'll be kind of a big reduction, but I'll make sure that venues where we can have more people. I've got a second edition. So the book I'm working on, or will start working on next week, is a 10-year anniversary second edition of my first book, Dreams of Awakening. So I'll update all the science, all the trauma stuff, write a few new chapters. So, sometimes you get second editions. It's like, this is the same book. I don't want to do that to people. If I'm going to do a second edition, I'll make sure there's loads of cool new stuff in there. And then I've got loads of online courses. So although I may not be traveling as much next year, there's like the Mind Valley online course, the Awake Academy one. I've been doing a new online course based on the new book. So this will be for stress and trauma affected sleep. So lots of stuff coming.
That's big. We'll drop all those links in the show notes.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you very much for joining us there. I'm going to need to listen to that back, I think, as well.
Thank you. It's been really fun. Thank you for asking cool questions that most people don't ask. It's been enjoyable, genuinely. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
I'm going to try some of those techniques tonight and get myself optimized for tomorrow. So.
Yeah. And have a nap later today.
Have a little nap.
Treat yourself.
Have a little nap. Amazing, Charlie. Thank you so much, man.
Cool. Thanks, dude.
All right. Guys, don't forget, keep it KALIBRE. Tune into the next podcast. Coming soon.